Welcome to another episode of Hames and Henderson Chilliwack Now. As always, I'm joined by Paul Henderson, the editor of the Chilliwack Progress, and I'm Clint Hames, former mayor with the city of Chilliwack. This episode, we're going to be talking about politics, mostly municipal politics. It's officially silly season right now, and election signs are springing up like weeds around the town, and we want to focus in on that issue, talk specifically with two local politicians as our panel, and also we have a guest who's going to talk about municipal politics on a broader level. So we'll be back after this word from our sponsor, Zacharias Vickers.
Welcome back. With us today is Hamish Telford. He's an associate professor of political science at the University of the Fraser Valley. He is past president of the BC Political Studies Association, and he twice served on the board of the Canadian Political Science Association. He is a frequent commenter on BC and Canadian politics in the national and even international media. Welcome to the show, Hamish.
Thank you, Paul.
Yeah,
Welcome,
for sure.
Hamish.
Thank you, Clint.
So just to start things off, we're talking about municipal politics. And one of the main things that strikes a lot of us who cover it and who have been involved in it is voter turnout. Why is voter turnout so low in municipal politics? Do you know?
It's a very complex question. And we have been witnessing declining voter turnout in Canadian elections at the federal, provincial, and even municipal levels for 3 decades now. And we haven't really figured out why this is happening, and it just continues to happen despite efforts to turn it around. Municipal level turnout has always been the lowest, so federal is highest, provincial next, and municipal the lowest. I think it's in part, although the municipal issues are really important to people's lives, it's getting clean water delivered to your house, public transit, libraries, swimming pools, garbage collection, fire, police services, all of that stuff's really important to our everyday lives. People should be engaged in this. But at the local level, I think it's perhaps difficult to get messages out. The national and provincial media covers the big boys and girls in politics, and it's tougher at the local level to get that message out. It's tougher to get people engaged. There's just a lack of awareness, I think, at the local level. Mm-hmm.
Is there any, is it related at all, do you think, to there being issues? I know in Chilliwack, if we have a big mayoralty contest where there's, two heavyweights going at it, a vacancy, say, in the mayor's chair, it tends to bring some folks out. Is that, does that happen in other jurisdictions that you're following where there's a, big mayor's race or something like that where we can drive turnout?
Absolutely. When there's perceived competitive election, turnout goes up at all levels, right? And the best turnout in American elections we've seen in a century was the last one with Donald Trump and Joe Biden, because it was competitive and people thought there were high stakes involved, and so people got out. So I do recall an election sometime in the past here in Chilliwack when the mayor was running as a single candidate, the incumbent, and was going to be acclaimed, and turnout was really, really
16%.
low. Yeah, it was terrible.
That was one of mine. I was happy not to run, but it was very disappointing that there wasn't much of a turnout.
So when there is a competitive race in particular, people will turn out, and when there are issues as well that really involve people, then they're more likely to turn out. Of course, we are facing some very serious issues this time. Yeah. The cost of living in particular. Chilliwack's a community that's seen skyrocketing house prices over the last year. I guess they've moderated a little bit over the last few months, and maybe will moderate in the future months as well. But so cost of living is an issue in this community as well as other communities in the Lower Mainland. I think a lot of people are concerned about it. Even people who own houses already are concerned about their kids and grandkids.
Exactly.
Will they ever be able to own a house in this community, or are they going to have to go somewhere far away in order to find a home?
So when you're listening to people talk about local politics, what are people saying local governments can do better in terms of managing things like the cost of housing? Where are there places out there where you're sort of looking and saying, boy, that community seems to be has that under control, and other places where you're kind of going, wow, they just don't have a plan? Is there
Well, it's obviously a difficult problem. I think if there were easy solutions, they would have been done long ago. We've been talking about cost of living one way or another for a long time. And generally, the house prices just continue to go up across the country. And we've been through a period of rapid growth. I moved to this province 30 years ago, and I remember how difficult it was as a student at UBC to find an apartment that I could afford. And nothing's changed. 30 years, students are still facing that. And of course, young people trying to find places to rent in Vancouver. But it's spread out into the valley now. Trying to find affordable places to rent in Abbotsford or Chilliwack is challenging now.
Yeah, very challenging. Very challenging.
And I always wonder, though, how much we talk about voter turnout and how much the municipal government can affect these things. Because a lot of times nobody wants to pass the buck, but the reality is a lot of times the municipal government doesn't have a ton of control over these things that can help affordability. But are there areas where they can have an impact?
I think so, but in a longer term sense, of course, if you speak to the higher levels of government, they say that the stumbling block is the local level, right?
Yeah.
Because they control zoning.
That's right.
And then I think city politicians, you'll be hearing from a couple later, will say when we try to zone, we hear from ratepayers that they don't want that development in their backyard because it's too big, it's going to cause too much congestion. And of course, politicians are responsive to the voters that they hear from. And those ratepayers are the ones who are more likely to vote in a municipal election than people seeking to rent a place.
So I feel like there's two schools of thought in terms of voter turnout at a municipal level or even provincial or federal. One says people don't come out because generally they're happy and they think, whatever. Nothing seems to change much and my vote's not going to make a difference. And I'm typically pretty happy. So there's that kind of contented electorate, which I'd like to believe some of the time. And then there's the theory that says at a municipal level, because there's no party politics, say in Chilliwack, it's people don't declare their affiliation to a provincial or national party. They simply run and you have to kind of figure out from who they are, how they might vote in particular situations. Because it requires that incredible kind of attention by voters at the municipal level, I think a lot of folks are too busy or lazy or so. Is one of those true or are both of those true to some extent?
I think both of those can actually be true.
Yeah.
I do think the declining voting turnout rates we've seen in Canada and the historically low levels that we've seen at municipal levels is problematic from the point of view of a democracy. Democracy is supposed to be the rule of the people, and if the people don't step up, we don't have a democracy anymore. So I tend to view it from that perspective. I do have to say, as someone who moved to BC from Ontario, I find the municipal electoral system in British Columbia a little confounding with the at-large system. So where I grew up in Toronto, the city was divided into wards, and you would have councillors running in your ward, and then the mayor for the city, and same with school trustees and so on. Much easier to get a handle on the candidates in your single ward than it is, there'll be 15 or 20 people running for council here in Chilliwack. More, of course, in Vancouver. And if they're not running in slates, it becomes really difficult to figure out who all these people are, what they stand for. These people don't have big campaigns where they necessarily have social media and websites, and they're not necessarily delivering flyers to every door in the community. It becomes a challenge to figure out who all these people are and how to vote.
Yeah. And there is obviously someone in the media, or blame the media, but there's maybe a functional institutional issue with the media in that, as you say, obviously the CBCs and CTVs and national newspapers are covering provincial but it's impossible for them to cover every municipality. So the only ones who can cover every municipality is the local community media outlets such as The Progress and Chilliwack, and it's hard for us to keep up with, if there's 20 city council candidates and 11, it's hard for us to get it all out there in a package. So people just don't have the media to consume to learn about the candidates, I think.
That's right. And if I remember correctly, there used to be 2 local papers in Chilliwack. Now there's one, and it's probably a smaller newsroom than it used to be.
Yeah. I was from the other.
Much more effective and efficient, however. But
no competition. It helps.
You talked about slates in Vancouver, and that seems to be a growing trend from my limited perspective, a growing trend. Vancouver has always had party politics for as long as I can remember. Some of it's destructed very nicely these days. But Surrey also seems to be having that kind of exercise. Are you seeing that as a trend that's moving out in lieu of, say, the ward system? Maybe party politics is the next step. Do you see that as happening in places that you pay attention to, Abbotsford or other places? Are those slates starting to form?
I think so, and particularly since we've had changes in the campaign financing rules, right? There used to be two standard parties in Vancouver, the NPA and COPE. Those kind of have fallen by the wayside. But each big mayor candidate now is creating his or her own slate. Kennedy Stewart ran last time as an independent, but that's hard to do in a big city. You really need a team, and he's created a team for himself this time. And we're seeing the same in Surrey. So the parties that we're seeing emerging are really the electoral vehicle for a particular mayoralty candidate.
Yeah, interesting.
As opposed to sort of a consistent party system that we had in Vancouver for so many years. And that's a model which I think might start to spread out, particularly as cities like Abbotsford and Chilliwack get bigger. With more and more people, I think running in slates makes sense. And mayoralty candidates may find it helpful to have a slate behind them as well, so that they can campaign in all corners of the city.
And so rather than having a political objective left or right, you simply have a slate that coalesces around a mayor and whatever vision they're putting forward.
That's right. And if you look at these slates that you're seeing, or parties emerging in Surrey and Vancouver as well, the slates have a diversity of candidates so they can speak to different constituencies. So you've got your Indo-Canadian councillor candidates, your South Asian, your East Asian, your Chinese candidates, and so on and so forth. Get a diverse slate pulled together so you can campaign in all of these communities.
And I see less and less that it's about the kind of typical party politics and more local issues.
That's
about, we want to see economic development of this area, or we want to see this, we want to see that. So it's an interesting thing that's happening. I wonder if it'll come to Chilliwack. I don't know.
We have had slate in Abbotsford.
Oh, is there? Yes.
In the last election. I'm not sure what the state of it is in this election, but there was a slate on the council side of it. It wasn't attached to a mayoralty candidate, but there was a slate of people running for council. They were successful at that.
Yeah.
There's some almost informal sort of slates forming in the school board, as you know, with there's a progressive meeting on September 20th of them, and one of the not progressive candidates has made a list of who you should vote for if you don't want that. So there really is a division there, which is actually not, I don't think, a healthy thing, but it is what it is.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting thing to watch, but it may not be all that helpful in terms of driving good public education policy, but we'll see. Hamish, it's been just a pleasure having you here and talking about a few of those things. We're going to have you back to do
a lot more
analysis of our local election, which is coming up.
Maybe the next provincial election, federal election.
Absolutely, love to have you as a guest in all of those things. That's awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. That was Hamish Telford from UFV, who you probably know from various appearances and discussions on other media besides this one. Thanks so much, Hamish. We'll be back after this quick break with our guests. Welcome back, everyone. We're so excited to have two guests as our panel to talk about municipal politics, and I can't think of anyone better than having our current mayor, Ken Popove, with us, and Sue Knott, who's a councillor with the City of Chilliwack and retiring shortly after silly season is over with. Welcome, you guys. It's so nice to have you here. I will say that it is officially election season, and this isn't meant to be a campaign stop for folks. It's meant to, we really want to talk about municipal politics and try to find ways to encourage people to come out to vote and talk about the issues that all communities are facing. So maybe I'll start with the first question, and that is, we asked Dr. Telford, we said, municipal level politics the voter turnouts have been disappointing, and even disappointing when there's a huge mayoralty race or, a big issue that's out there. What do you think some of the reasons are, and what are some of the things you think we ought to maybe be trying to do about that? Sue, let me start with you.
All right, thank you, Clint. You know, I think one of the reasons that people don't necessarily come out in a municipal election is generally they're happy. You know, they're happy with what's going on. But that being said, there's lots of things that, you know, lots of information that we would love to receive, and there's lots of things that they can do to pick a really great candidate for themselves. And I think one of the things is that a lot of our community, they don't necessarily understand what municipal responsibilities are, provincial responsibilities, and federal responsibilities. Because as a municipal government, we're in a position to most affect their daily lives. And yet, we get the least amount of voter turnout. And, you know, that to me is very disappointing. But I think if people realized how much of what they concern themselves with on a regular basis is municipal, they'd be more likely to turn out and take a good listen to the candidates to find out who's, you know, aligned with them.
So what do you think we ought to be doing?
Good point, Sue.
Yeah.
And yeah, because at this level of government, we create the most change, which you know.
Absolutely.
Your time on mayor, taxes, your sewer rates, the infrastructure that we're putting in, not so much a healthcare, but the social, side of the house as well. We control that. We partner with BC Housing and with Fraser Health to create these strategies. I think I know we've done a good job. We do send out surveys to folks. A little bit disappointing in the numbers that we get back for us to base the data on to move forward on issues. But it's that's a question that's, it's really tough to answer. What we do is create the most change. And if you don't follow along with what we're trying to achieve, then, I'm not sure what we can do to change that.
And
Actually,
I've always heard that, like if the federal government disappeared tomorrow, it would take like a month to notice. And if the provincial government disappeared, it would take a week to notice. But if the municipal government disappeared, you'd notice tomorrow when your garbage wasn't picked up.
Exactly. And I'd be getting a stack of emails. Why was my garbage picked up? Well, I don't know.
Well, you wouldn't be there because you'd disappeared.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right. We'd all be getting them.
Everybody be getting those. So does the local government or any local government have some responsibility to say, okay, people don't know what we do. Maybe we ought to focus a whole bunch of our communication strategy with the community on talking to people about the things we actually do.
Well, you know what? I think that is a really important component that's missing. And it's something that I've always said that I feel like even when you go into kind of a municipal election, you have all sorts of candidates who clearly don't have a clue what a municipal government does, which, is sad. And so they'll say, well, I'm going to fix this and I'm going to fix that. And you're thinking in your head, municipal, that's municipal. Yeah. No, provincial. No, federal. Yeah. And honestly, there should be something available to people so they could say, go there and say, okay, this is municipal, and these are all the things that my vote will influence. Yeah. And once they realize how important that is, then they would be more informed and more likely to vote. But yeah, it should be published somewhere. Maybe it should be in the newspaper. Maybe it should be something that, I think we have done an amazing job of trying to get feedback from the community. We really engage our community. But I think what's missing, perhaps, is that information to educate the community. We're so busy asking them to educate us on what they want. We're not giving them the parameters to say, this is municipal, this is provincial, and this is federal.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, Clint. It's communication is getting the word out to folks. And for every issue that we have on the table, what do you think of X, Y, Z? How do you think you can play a role by feeding us information through your agency or through what have you? If you're sitting around having a cup of coffee with your neighbor, extrapolate that idea so we can maybe go with that, because we don't have all the answers. But the communications piece, I've always said that, and like the rest of council is on board with that. Let's talk. Let's get out there and collaborate, communicate, so we know what you're thinking, because we don't have all the answers. We're pretty diverse in what we know and what we can do, the powers that we do, which you know as well as ex-mayor, but just the communication piece, as I feel, is the most important piece of this.
Go ahead.
We do. We should do something almost in the newspaper. There should almost be a handbook that, or some sort of a online guide that explains the different levels of government.
Yeah. Really if you don't vote,
Yeah.
This is what you're saying you don't care about.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
If I can jump in there, I'm sorry, but just, with Chuck Other Communities, I've often
Yes.
talked to Jennifer, and, we've got 50 plus service providers that sit at the same table.
Yeah.
And all the work that's done in the background with not working in silos, working together, collaborating together, I've often said to her, you got to sit at this table and tell people, because
know.
people say, you aren't doing anything. Well, that's a pile of crap, because we're doing a lot.
Well, I sat on a communications committee with CHC,
Yeah.
and you said Jennifer. You're talking about Jennifer Feinberg, who's
you're
our municipal reporter at the Chilliwack Progress.
Yeah.
And yeah, we do see every Friday CHC sends out a sort of a list of things that comes from some of the providers, and a lot of that is really interesting stuff. But there should be more of a strategy of communications.
And you see, I think that what Paul won't say is, but he took the time to say it to me on a couple of occasions. The newspaper isn't your communications department, so and that's I think that's an important lesson, and it's not like I think we have as politicians we would have a tendency to sort of say, well, why isn't the media doing their job and telling this wonderful story about how good we are? And the newspaper's response would be, we're not your PR firm.
You tell us.
Yeah.
So,
you tell us, we will repeat it.
It's
I don't know. I kind of think different from that point of view. I don't know. I think they are, right? Because they're, a community paper, and this is community. And these are issues that we face on a daily basis. Especially on the social side of the house.
Absolutely.
So I would have an argument with you there.
But what I mean
Work
there is
together.
that you need to that if you guys package up a communications
which we
Peace.
do. Yeah.
and tell us,
Yeah.
we will almost for
Yeah.
sure repeat it.
I guess I'm being selfish. I want you at the table is what I want.
We wanted to tell you want us to do that.
Yeah, maybe if you made a large donation to their newspaper.
I like the idea, but it's
I'll
not
buy the
always
cupcakes
easy.
or something. I don't know. I gotta get you there somehow.
Communication, I think we agree. We all agree that the effective communication is going to drive better voter turnout.
Yeah.
So you guys have been in the job. Sue, you've been there 14 years.
I have.
And I think
What a pleasure.
Ken, you've been there
I'll be
11 and
Just about 11. Yeah.
11.
Yeah.
And you've got your finger on the pulse of what's happening in other places, because I know you're involved in UBCM and FCM and municipalities around the country.
Yeah.
What are the big issues that we maybe as a community aren't really paying enough attention to as we move forward? There must be things that kind of keep you up at night that municipalities, gosh, we better be better prepared for this as we move forward. Any municipality, what are those things you can think of?
Well, first of all, I would say that we're probably really aware of them, and they are things that we're working on. But, every single day we deal with the issues of homeless and drug addiction. And that belongs to another level of government. And we have done everything we can to advocate for our community and to bring those dollars here. At one time, we weren't even listed on the list of communities that were in trouble as far as drug addiction and homeless people. So, that's probably the biggest challenge that we have. And it's not a challenge that we're experiencing on our own. It's a challenge that they have in every major city. And so that's one thing that gets talked about constantly at FCM and UBCM and around the council table. How do we manage this? How do we make strides forward? Because it always seems like you take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. We've been able to bring a lot of dollars to the community for different facilities that we've been able to build, and some that are on the way coming. But that's probably, it just seems to be a never-ending battle. And, if we make our community too good as far as the facilities and all the services that we provide here, then all of a sudden the bus loop is packed with people that are coming to Chilliwack because we provide better services here for the unhoused and for addictions and all the rest of it. So, you've got to find a happy medium there, but that's probably one of the biggest things. Yeah. Another thing is affordability in housing. Like, that is a major issue here. And one of the things that we've done around the council table is to try and create developments where there are, tiny apartments, there's, subsidized apartments, trying to create that balance of all sorts of different types of housing so that we can accommodate people who are lower income or people that, like young kids that are just getting started and want to buy an apartment so they can build up to maybe buying a house at some point. And we've done all that. And yet, You know, you just can't keep ahead of it. Like with the amount of people that are coming to Chilliwack all the time, it's impossible to keep ahead of all of that requirement. So, but we, you know, it's a big part of what we do, and a lot of people don't realize.
Is it time to go higher than 6 stories?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, just wondering.
Well, I mean, there's economics that are involved in that.
If
Though.
a developer wants to
Once
And
you start
building materials,
building
right?
in concrete instead of wood,
Yeah.
You're raising costs and your footing costs and all of those things going down into the ground further
Yeah,
because you
and-
have to, for a building that size, which brings the water table into play, which, you know,
And the small size apartment, all of a sudden the cost of it goes through the roof.
That's correct,
And so
yeah.
you haven't met your objective, which is trying to, but I agree. I think that we need some much taller buildings and a lot more different options. But, you know, we're working towards it for sure.
we're out of land.
Well, yeah, because we can't build out, we need to build up.
Yeah.
You know, because we are surrounded by the ALR land. 67% of our land base is in the ALR, and you can't build on that.
So what incentives are there out there for, you know, there's the development at the Safeway site, as an example, is a perfect example of a development scale that's going to make the most money for a developer. That's a scale, 6 stories, and that's the scale to build that to make, if you're making money. So if you want somebody to build higher than that, are there incentives that the city can provide to say, okay, we know that's what you want to build, we need you to go up, here's what we would offer? Are there any discussions like that? Is there anything you can do?
There are incentives for smaller units.
Yeah.
There, you know, there's incentives around parking and all that kind of thing, and different
DCCs,
costs,
you know,
DCCs, which
Yeah,
you know come
development
into play.
costs, yeah.
But as far as you know, expecting someone to build a 20-story building, the additional costs of all the concrete and all the rest of that, there's no incentives in place for that yet, and I think there is a gap there.
Chilliwack's not quite ready for that, I don't think. But it's on the heels. We are one of the fastest growing communities in Western Canada, and that's going to be the next conversation is build it bigger and higher, and because we have to accommodate the people.
Yeah.
But just back on the housing side, we did change the zoning on our carriage houses, where it used to be that you had to have a family member either in the house or in the actual carriage house. Now that's not there anymore. So we have loosened up the
And basement suites.
regulation exactly on that issue, just to allow more affordable housing. And I've been hearing the latest trend is a couple of families getting together and moving in together and sharing a house just to share the cost. Like for my stepdaughter is looking for a place, $3,000 a month. She's got 2 kids, and that's the room that she needs, but that's just unattainable. So there's different strategies that people are taking to be able to afford to live.
Yeah. Is there discussions with the province
That's what I was going to ask.
to say, okay, how do we partner better on some of this affordability
Well, and
stuff?
he kind of went after us. He didn't think that we were, processing our building permits, fast enough, and he was going to put the thumb on.
Has he been to Vancouver?
Yeah. And I go, well, hang on. Have you seen our, turnaround time? Yeah, it was at about, 3 to 4 months now, just because of the volume. It has increased, but we're doing a pretty good job turning stuff around here and getting it into the contractor's hands so they can build their product and get it out in the market. So
We used to be faster. We used to be a lot faster.
It's all volume.
But
It is volume.
I remember. I can tell you times there were 30 days turnarounds on permits, and but I'm chuckling about the demands that you have. We used to try to figure out how we were going to get people to come here.
That's right.
Thanks a lot.
And then I remember, learning about this as mayor, where we had a consultant who was working with us who said there's a double-edged sword to making a beautiful community and a beautiful region. And he said, this was back in the 1990s, he said the Lower Mainland is going to explode once you hit 2010, that time frame, because we've created one of the nicest places on earth to live.
Yeah.
And it's in our backyard.
I wrote a column about that once. It ended with the new tourism slogan should be beautiful BC, but you wouldn't like it.
Yeah.
With 100 parks, 100 trails, all the vistas, the lakes, the golf courses. We live in a beautiful part of the world. And
There's actually a sign.
question.
There's actually a sign in the Chilliwack River Valley. You noticed that? I remember Jeff Bonner hated it, but as you drive out,
Yeah.
As you leave the Chilliwack River Valley, there's a sign as you come into it, like very soon on the road.
Okay.
It says Chilliwack, welcome to the Chilliwack River Valley.
Yeah.
And on the way out, the sign says, shh, don't tell anyone.
Well, I think
It's
the
too
secret's
late.
out.
Yeah, I'm going to say it's way too late for
You
that.
see what's happening up at Cultus Lake with the parking issues that they're having, and so it's it's been
We've been discovered, and it's not unlike, there's lots of other cities in the world that are like that. San Francisco and the Bay Area experienced this 25, 30 years ago, just a phenomenal explosion of growth, and now completely unaffordable. And other areas in the world are like that. We're just one of those places where people want to be here, and it's going to take a lot of skill.
But young people are leaving, which is a problem. I know people who are. I know a guy who was a transit driver, and he just went to Edmonton because he said he can't.
I've heard that,
Yeah.
and
And they're-
that's welcome to Edmonton. I wouldn't live there.
I wouldn't live there either, but
Well, and they are running very appealing ads to say how cheap it is to live there. In Alberta in
The
general.
premier, he's really trying hard to get.
Yeah,
folks
trying to
moved
get
there.
And
people to
we
move
just
there.
did a trip throughout British Columbia and north of Kamloops. There's opportunities abounding. There is reasonably affordable housing, jobs going begging, and a wonderful part of our province. So it does create some opportunities.
Yeah.
You have to kind of be an economic refugee and say, okay, we're going to go to somewhere else. I mean, it happened in Grand Prairie. It happened in other places where those jobs went begging, and then all of a sudden they had an explosion. So.
is there any conversation ever? I know we don't like to almost talk about the ALR. It's almost like this still talking about the war.
yeah, they're-
And as you say, 67%. I remember my former colleague and Chilliwack resident Mike Schwernard used to describe Chilliwack as a sausage. And it's just squeezed on all sides by the ALR.
Yeah.
And most of that land is being farmed and being utilized.
But not all of it.
I know this is what I was going to
There was
say.
a big study done through UFV. Lenora, I can't remember her last name, but she did a study just to
Lenore Newman.
great lady.
She's brilliant.
She put stuff out in black and white, and holy crap, that's really, because there's land that's in the ALR that's like a gravel
Gravel.
pit. So
Well-
they got to really have a look at that, and we need places for these folks to build shops, to fix tractors, to go work in the fields. So, and that's what we're missing, that piece.
Well, at some
the
point, the
industrial.
value of affordable housing may trump the value of this notion that we grow all our own food here, which we don't.
No.
We're great at dairy, and we're good at chickens.
Good cedar hedging, too.
And we got great cedar hedging, but we're not growing our own food supply here.
Yeah.
And maybe in the future
But
we
we're
would have to.
providing the rest of Canada and
But we're
other
not
places in the world with all of that. And I have to stand up for agriculture.
of course you do.
Because I look at that once that really fertile ground, or these farms are gone, they're gone forever.
Yeah,
and so I think that there should be a study done, a really in-depth study done about the quality of the soil, what's going to be grown there. I don't understand why we're in a position where we put greenhouses on perfectly wonderful soil. A greenhouse can go anywhere.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be on agricultural
industrial
land. But the Agricultural Land Commission has their rules, and they are adamant that that's exactly how it should be.
Well,
so,
I think we can look to other jurisdictions and say maybe they're doing it better. And one of the jurisdictions I'm aware of in the UK, they went through this process, and they eventually got to a place where they said, okay, here's land that you can build on, and here's land you can't, after an exhaustive look at their land base.
Yeah.
And then they said, there's no process to remove land. It's just agricultural land, end of story. As long as we have that speculative ability that some people have, in their minds, like, ooh, I think we could, as long as that exists, I think we're going to have this pressure on that land that shouldn't be there. We should simply say, if we're going to have an agricultural land base, there it is. It's there forever. Forget it.
but
there
these
needs
other-
to
these
be a
other
process
pieces
to
are-
get to the point that says, what's the land we need to protect?
That
Yeah.
study's been done. We have that study in
Yeah.
our hands,
Yeah.
and now we just have to try to get them to act on it.
Yeah.
And another sidebar to that is food processing. When we were in Ireland for 3 or 4 days, we were running out of milk, gas, everything. And there's a food processor that wants to come to Chilliwack. I'm not going to say who, but they've been kicking the tires of Chilliwack and would bring hundreds of jobs here. And it's all tied into the farming industry where these are actually farmed here and could be processed here. But again, it's a stumbling. We've gone to the province and we've kicked their tires and we've tried to get them to see our point, but it's just fallen on deaf ears. But we're going to keep going. We're not going to stop.
Listen, we got to wrap it up,
Yep.
and I'm just I think we could do this for another hour. And thank you so much for talking with us
Thank
about
you.
local government, and I particularly excited about the notion that we can continue to have local government talk about the things that they do, and I think that's a really good,
Thanks
really
for
good
coming
thing.
on, guys.
Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
thanks for having us.
This is
I appreciate it.
another episode of Hames and Henderson, Chilliwack Now. We'll be back with other guests and other shows after this season. This is our final episode of this season. We'll be doing some more planning. We'd love to hear from you about how you've enjoyed these episodes and other episodes that you'd like to see. We'll be back at chillTV with an election night covering the municipal elections, so that should be fun, and I'm hoping that former councillor at that point, Knott, will probably join us and provide some commentary for that. We'll have other guests and we'll have an exciting evening for you. So until then, we'll see you soon.